For the first time since the Cold War, the Navy is expanding its Chaplain Corps. This year alone, the goal is to fill 70 active duty slots, a number that would place one chaplain on board every destroyer.
A lot of the bad behaviors, a lot of the evidences of stress are reduced on ships, in units that have chaplains.
Rear Admiral Gregory Todd serves as the Navy's Chief of Chaplains, a position that also covers the Marine Corps and Coast Guard. Over the course of his career, Todd has worked as a chaplain in all three branches, responding to Ground Zero after 9/11 and deploying to both Iraq and Afghanistan.
The funny thing about being a chaplain is the most satisfying moments are in some of the most challenging times, because you're there to bring God into that situation.
With growing mental health issues threatening service members across the board, Todd says chaplains can be the tip of the spear.
We become often first responders for them as they experience some of these stress issues. Some of them are normal stressors of life, and we can help them and normalize those things. But we also work with our partners in the mental health world when something becomes a lot more serious than just a normal stressor.
According to research from Columbia University, Duke, and Harvard, those engaged in spiritual practices are 50 to 80% less likely to die by suicide and 60% less likely to suffer depression. Todd says the Pentagon's decision to grow the Chaplain Corps is part of an effort to better care for people, a new emphasis on what he calls spiritual readiness. Now it's up to him to fill the vacancies, and he's counting on a new generation to answer the call. While a chaplain at Emory University, Lieutenant Commander Saul Burleson says God put military ministry on his heart.
When I looked at the men and women in uniform, what I found was people who were committing their lives to something greater, something greater than themselves. They were serving the Constitution. They were upholding and defending our inalienable rights.
Burleson now serves as a Navy chaplain on the USS Macon Island. While his sailors are similar in age to the college students with whom he once worked, the job responsibilities look quite different.
We're embedded with our sailors, our Marines, our Coast Guardsmen. We serve all the sea services and the men and women in uniform in those, wherever they're at, on board a ship, across the Atlantic or Pacific, with the Marines in a desert or in the Arctic. We're with them wherever they are.
Sometimes I would joke, I'd say, my job is to hang out with you guys as you do your job. But the reality is you're there to spend time, to tell stories, to go to the motor pool, to be there. And then in that life connection, transformation begins to take place. Someone needs time. People go, hey, Chaplain, you got a minute? The answer is always yes.
Lieutenant Colonel Brandon Moore is an Army chaplain. After years deploying with soldiers, he now serves as a recruiter for the chaplaincy school at Fort Jackson. As the branch with the largest Chaplain Corps, Moore says the Army isn't looking to grow, but rather to maintain.
We're looking at recruiting the best qualified. Really, we're looking at about 300 each year. But when you think about all of the qualifications, it is hard to find the best qualified to continue to serve.
Military chaplains are required to meet the same age and physical fitness standards as any other service member. Plus, there's educational requirements, which include a bachelor's degree, a master's in divinity or some area of religion, and then professional ministry experience.
Soldiers give up an awful lot, but they shouldn't have to give up their faith. So we want the best qualified chaplains of all different faith groups.
Second Lieutenant Michael Engelsjerd is a candidate at the Army's chaplaincy school. He felt called to minister to soldiers after his own military service. As he goes through the chaplaincy program, he's learning to view the men and women he serves alongside in a much different light.
It's a very different role. And as I'm learning things in seminary and learning about what ministry is, it's like I'm in the same places doing something completely different. And being able to draw on that experience while still having to get used to the new lens of what it means to be a chaplain.
3 decades into his career, Admiral Todd calls caring for the men and women of the armed services a sacred honor and privilege.
I said, okay, Lord, I'll do this for 4 years. I'll do one tour, and that's been over 30 years ago. This flock has a way of getting under your skin. And so then the prayer turned to, Lord, I'll do this as long as you need me to do this because I love doing it and I'm happy to do that. But I can't decide when to go home. You have to tell me. And so I'm still here until the Navy says, okay, now you have to go home. You're too old. You have to go home now.
While the Navy is currently asking for 70 additional chaplains, Todd anticipates need for even further growth. And the Marine Corps and Coast Guard are expected to follow suit. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.